With 6 hours remaining, his final request was not mercy. It was the dog. The decision stirred rules, tightened hearts, and began loosening a truth buried beneath routine. The corridor breathed cold air at 7:30 a.m., and fluorescent light flattened every shadow. Keys knocked against belts, and damp concrete lifted a faint mineral smell. Daniel carried a worn leather leash looped twice round his hand. The clock above intake watched without blinking, and something in the room quietly tilted. Warden Cole traced a red-stamped ledger as if time could be kept inside margins. Ramirez stood quiet and steady, eyes reading the room instead of faces. Harlan rushed through movement papers, pen scraping faster than the lines allowed. The leash pricked his calluses, and the simple request began to feel strangely heavy. Daniel sat on a metal cot that held night chill even after sunrise. Scars along his hands mapped years of heavy work, each ridge catching light. The leash's cracked grain tugged memory forward, smelling faintly of old oil and rain. He wanted presence more than comfort, and he braced for whatever followed next. 7 clean years sat behind his name like orderly shelves. No fights, no infractions, no hidden contraband. Routine had replaced anger with quiet accountability that did not ask to be seen. He believed the request honored a bond that predated the world's judgment, and the air felt briefly expectant. Rules lined up like guardrails across a narrow bridge. Yard only, 10 minutes, tight supervision with no exceptions. Ramirez pointed to the spotless record with a single tap. Cole nodded and wrote slowly in the red-stamped ledger. Approval arrived with conditions, and the visible clock grew louder in everyone's minds. 2 vest cameras blinked on standby, tiny red eyes resting near clipped radios. The corridor held a cooler pocket, as if air conditioning favored policy rooms. Harlan clipped his badge and looked down at his boots too long. He initialed the movement slip with hurried strokes, and the page seemed to resist. The yard opened to morning haze that softened painted stripes. A German shepherd trotted across the threshold, black and tan coat bright against concrete. Daniel lowered to one knee and steadied his shoulders. Fur pressed into old leather, warmth replacing chill along his sleeves. Time loosened, and breath steadied. Max leaned against Daniel's chest with the weight of remembered nights. The coat smelled of clean air and dust, familiar and anchoring. Daniel's fingers found the leash's smooth, worn edge where years had thinned the grain. The yard's damp air rose like steam above asphalt, and memory brightened. The dog's body locked, without warning, tail halting mid-swing. Ears pivoted, and a low rumble formed deep and steady. The gaze cut toward the far stripe where Harlan stood stiff. Heat swam over the yard lines, and warmth fractured into alertness that pointed like a compass. Ramirez watched the angle of the shoulders and measured the distance. The fixation held as if pulled by wire. He remembered a missing name from the arrest night roster and felt the weight of silence. Reports had skipped an intake presence, and the omission scratched like grit under skin. A contractor badge flashed the wrong color for a second, then scanned clean. The laminate sent a harmless green wink along the fence. The suspicion slid away from the contractor's belt and returned to the fixed gaze. The dog did not blink, and attention refused to release its target. The interview room breathed recirculated air that tasted metallic and dry. The door closed soft and final, keeping voices small. Max lay at Daniel's heel, eyes trained on the hallway gap like a sentry. Printer wheels spun somewhere near the desk, and paper edges rasped under a thumb. A neighbor call sheet detail surfaced from years ago, written in thin block letters. The fluorescent hum steadied, and Warden Cole pressed fresh ink into the ledger. The execution window paused, and time changed shape without ceremony. Max watched the doorway, and the rumble returned under tile. Logs came out of the records cage smelling of paper dust and plastic. A badge number sat wrong against the on-duty list, its digits misaligned with reported hours. Door magnet ticks contradicted a shift narrative by precise minutes. The anomaly narrowed the field and seemed to breathe. Access pings clustered near intake long after official coverage ended. A signature scribble matched the hurried cadence of Harlan's earlier hand. The console screen washed faces in sterile blue glow that left no place to hide. The air felt drier, like rulebooks exhaling after holding breath. Fingerprints were retested under independent controls, and a clean partial lifted from sealed evidence. Transit records corrected a neighbor's late timeline, pushing claimed sightings past credible departure times. The contractor path cleared completely, and the false lead collapsed without noise. The circle tightened around one story that resisted light. Camera buffer restored pre-event movement in dim green tones. A silhouette crossed intake before coverage, shoulders squared in familiar shape. Exit sign light traced a profile more clearly than expected, building a quiet certainty. The contractor's schedule aligned elsewhere, and the red herring died without protest. The matched partial linked to Harlan's archived service print set. Door magnet ticks aligned with unscheduled presence in neat stair steps. Signed statements faced frames and timestamps, then wobbled. Body cam standby shifted to recording, and a pale overlay stamped time across still faces. Orders unfolded down the corridor like a measured wave. Cuffs closed on different wrists, and the quiet clang felt strangely final. The tower spotlight drifted, then settled on an empty lane. Daniel's name moved from silence into credibility, lifted by evidence rather than favor. Vest recordings displayed positions and timing with patient clarity. Unscheduled presence aligned exactly with the earlier roster gap. The hurried signature found its context under frame-by-frame scrutiny. What looked like ink became sequence, and sequence became consequence. The ledger page showed the delay, then the reversal proceedings in tight handwriting. The corridor's cool edge warmed slightly, like morning stepping fully into a room. Light reached corners that had stayed gray. The institution pivoted in plain view, and no one spoke. The outer gate swung with a scrape that sounded almost like wind against rail. Air felt warmer against skin, touched by sun rather than fluorescent wash. Daniel's stride steadied over gravel that crunched in honest rhythm. The leash rested easy in his palm, no longer evidence, now a keepsake. Max met him in the same patient light that had held the yard. Fences stood where they always stood. Gravel lay where it always lay. The world looked unchanged. Daniel did not. Truth had spoken without words and endured pressure without breaking. The leather softened under heat, and the edge no longer bit. Breath slowed until it matched the pulse at his wrist. The prop arc closed quietly, traveling from visible to threatened and finally redeemed. The man and the bond walked forward together. Loyalty rose where corruption had expected obedience and won in daylight. Integrity moved through quiet corridors, turned hard locks, and refused to make a spectacle. If that truth aligned with your path, carry it to one person who needs steady hope,